Hi, and welcome to the Rollwise Show, place where we talk about tabletop role playing games. Today, we're talking about the tabletop role playing game, The Wildsea, which we recently did some recorded plays of and have up on the channel. There's a link down in the comments for that. I was the Firefly or game master for the game, and Mike and Brent played the adventure. We played the pre-canned adventure, the one-armed scissor. And we're going to just talk about our thoughts about what we think about the Wildsea and maybe a little bit about the adventure, but it's mostly about the game today. Go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, so spoilers for people that are thinking about running the one-armed scissor. We may reference it as part of our how we explain our place in the world, so we apologize in advance.
Or stop, or just warning to everybody.
Yep.
It's always good to warn people up front so they know what they're getting into.
Mhm.
This was a bit of an odd game for us because I was the GM or the Firefly, which is not a normal occurrence. Mike is close to our forever GM. Brent GMs quite a bit. And I rarely do it. I rarely feel excited enough about a game to want to dive into it enough. And Wildsea is a game that came to my attention from watching an episode of Quinn's Quest one night. And I almost immediately went out and bought the game after watching that episode. Did you guys see that episode of Quinn's Quest when he talked about the Wildsea?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You guys weren't as
part of
pumped
it.
as I was, but obviously because I went out and bought the book. What did you think when you first heard about the Wildsea?
Well, so I personally felt that the Wildsea was fascinating, and I watched parts of the Quinn's Quest reviews. I mean, because his reviews are very long.
They're lengthy,
but
sure.
but they're very well put together. So if you haven't ever watched him review a game, it's actually quite he's got quite a talent for being able to take his thoughts and translate them into a fun way. It's something I'm kind of envious of. Thanks, Quinn's Quest. But no, I mean, I think what I was looking at is when I saw it, I immediately saw the cover art and I immediately saw what they were trying to do, and then I read the summary and I was like, oh, that's different. and kind of saw that it really wasn't trying to be like a Tolkien-esque, fantasy where you're just like swords and knights fighting, adventuring in the lands. I mean, you're still adventuring and stuff, but it is a very different backdrop for how you adventuring, what's your stories that you tell, and all that stuff. And I hadn't really ever heard of Felix Isaacs before, so I had very little experience with the engine that they use for Wildsea and everything like that. So it was kind of like it was more interesting just to see what kind of rules they were using for their kind of highly narrative game. What about you, Brent?
It's really interesting because it's very narrative, which is kind of neat, and it is a post-apocalyptic kind of adventure game, which I think is cool. And it comes from a different angle where you don't have to do like there's more things to do than just like fight monsters, which I think is good for a fantasy game, which I enjoyed.
Yeah, I was surprised. Well, one, I don't know how I hadn't conceived of it, but I'd never conceived of ships sailing through the canopy of these monstrous trees with chainsaws on the front to cut their way through.
Well, I think that's I think that's a different concept.
That paints a good picture.
Mm-hmm.
And but when we were playing the game, our first session, we spent a lot of time just with you guys exploring the town and talking to the people there. And I honestly think I'm not sure we rolled a dice, which for some people is a great thing, and for others is almost heresy. So, well, how did you guys feel that first session went when you were exploring the first town?
Well, I mean, the game's not very gamey, I guess. It's on the
It
lighter
isn't.
it's on the lighter side of the gamey games where it's not very crunchy at all. It's very highly narrative, and I think a lot of your sessions are going to wind up being that way because there's a lot of just basic role playing, which I think is I've said before and we've talked about before. I think is that's when you know a game is good when your players can just role play and not necessarily lean on the dice to like make up story.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think and I agree. It was very fun to try to it was very fun to try to understand, like, well, what is our place in the world? And of course, because it's narrative and we have kind of our own, um how do I say it, we can kind of influence the world how we see fit. You have a lot of freedom to add flourishes here and there to kind of make it interesting and kind of embellish the world around you. And I think this game plays to that strength a lot because it's such a unique and fantastic world that there's really kind of the sky's the limit. There wasn't really anything saying you can't do X, Y, and Z. It was more like, well, this is your starting point, and then you get to go, and then you can kind of take the game and make it your own from there. And so to put it to you though, Jeff, I mean, I know that you said you were really excited for the game after you saw it on Quinn's Quest and everything like that.
Yeah.
Being is such a new setting, how much were you in the camp of this is the coolest thing I've ever seen versus, oh shit, how do I actually play this? Like, where did you, how much did you get in both of those camps?
Well, obviously, at first, it was about 90%. Oh, holy shit, this sounds really cool. And the way you described it, I thought he did an excellent job selling the game. Not that that's what he was trying to do, but I was very receptive. After I got the book, though, then that became the time where how do you actually play this? Because we have played some narrative games, and I felt this was maybe even heavier on the narrative side than some of the other games that we've played.
Yeah, the only
Um,
thing comparable would be like Monster of the Week or something like that, because those are pretty. It had a similar system, and the narrative seemed pretty similar to me, where it had the same like chart of roll dice and fail with consequence, or you know succeed with consequence, or whatever,
right.
which is a narrative dice system. So I think those are the only games that I think of that we've played that are as comparatively narrative as that, because it's very narrative, that game.
Hmm.
Yes. And yeah, this game's so narrative that even in combat, like your characters can die, but really kind of only if you want them to.
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
like it's okay if it looks like the combat's going bad for somebody to decide that they want to sacrifice themselves and tell the firefly, I'm gonna wait till this happens, and then I'm gonna do this so that my friends can get away, or you can kind of control your own destiny that way,
Hmm.
like any storytelling game, because you're really I that was what I liked in the first session. Really was the interplay with you two in character, and then me playing several characters. I thought that was kind of interesting. You guys were really bought into the storytelling system. Do you find that a challenge when you pick up a new game to jump in, or at this point for you in your careers, is that old hat just getting into character and
I feel like knowing the rules is usually harder than playing a character.
Hmm.
A character, as a matter of fact, games, we talked about this when we were talking about like Dolmenwood and stuff like that, is games where you have less of a character are actually harder for me to enjoy than games that are more narrative. Like I lean towards the playing pretend with your friends side of things than the game side, I guess. So
Hmm.
I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's a preference.
okay,
Um, Partially because I played quite a few role playing games, and I like making characters and being character driven. Um,
Hmm.
so I think that is something that we do well.
Yeah, I agree with Brent. I mean, it's easy to lean into. I think the only thing that I would put a caution on, just a little tiny caution, is that this is a game that, as Brent likes to describe, is a game that you really can start with just building your immediate surroundings. Building an entire world and all that really doesn't help you in this as much as it may in other campaign style games, because I feel like since this is a shared storytelling experience, you really need to have the flexibility to know where your players take you, as opposed to you as the GM forcing a plot. And I think that that's where the game shines, is when it's that collaborative. collaborative, I don't know, exploration of the Wildsea. But I think as a
Yeah.
player, because it's so alien to you, you may have a hard time contributing, I guess would be the way to look at it. And I think if you look back at our playthroughs and everything like that, and this is something I was playing a fun char, which is a char is a culinary type character that's going to have a lot to cook and do all those kind of things. You get very minimal details as to what life is like. You're like, oh, we do like some nuts. Vegetables are hard to come by. Fruits kind of grow in the trees, and protein comes from stuff that you get. And you're like, okay, so how do you make bread? Like, can you make bread out of the nuts? I assume that we make almond bread or the equivalent of it, but you don't have like names for these things because you just don't know what it is. And so I think that as a new character, you may have a hard time riffing on it because you don't, there's not, that could be, there's not enough there. So like for me, I just kind of shorthand and I say, I make like a nut bread, and I don't have to tell you what name of the nut bread is or anything like that.
Sure.
But I could feel a little
You could have made
intimidated.
one up and we'd have just rolled with it.
Yeah, it's like any game where like all your choices are really big. Sometimes the pile looks
Mhm.
so big you don't know where to start. And
Mhm.
that's the problem with highly narrative games like this or some other games we played where it's like do what you want. Make up what if you don't know something, make it up. And that can be kind of hard because it's like
Mhm.
how do I make up something that's totally alien?
Exactly.
But
And
the truth is you don't. You just draw on your regular you draw on your experiences and what you've read in the framework that they've set up and then go from there. But yeah, you could have made bread and
yeah,
meat
and
or
like
something.
so rather than saying like I make almond bread, I make a nut bread. Is easy kind of like same way to get to the thing. And unless you guys want to create the flora, the fauna, and all of that
Sure.
kind of stuff as you go and keep that catalog, which I think would be a fascinating game if everyone
You
really
didn't want
bought
to
into
have us find a 150-foot almond tree with
150
almonds the
foot. You
size of
mean
your head?
3,000 foot almond tree?
3,000.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, you could have. I mean, the game does have some narrative framework to it. Like,
Mhm.
it's verdant, there's fruits and they have fruits and vegetables listed in the
Yes.
book.
Yep. Spline
So, I
apples
mean,
and stuff like that.
so like there is some stuff to like draw off of for
Mm.
that. So the whole framework isn't completely.
It's not entirely there, but it is alien. So it is an alien thing because you're not necessarily like, oh, I go through the verdant wheat fields that now don't exist. They may, I guess you could say they exist on certain spits of land and stuff like that. But one of the things I think is kind of interesting is that, and I'm curious if you had this thought as you were doing it, Jeff, is that, if as we were describing things, were you looking at that as being like, oh, that could easily be a resource or hazard? Like, could you using our own narrative against us?
Yes. No, that's one of the places that was challenging for me.
Mhm.
Rather than like in a crunchy game, it's remembering all of the specifics. Like, I don't know, do they use a D8 or a D12 here kind of thing,
Mhm.
And do they need to roll it 6 times in the next 4 minutes or only once? I'm joking, of course, but in this game, one of the sections in the rules for combat kind of struck me because
Mhm.
touching on something Brent said, it's really up to you and you really can do anything. And they're
Mhm.
like, well, if you want to swing across something and you don't know what's there because this is all theater of the mind, one of the
Mhm.
suggestions that the book had was the player should ask the Firefly, hey, is there anything that I could jump up onto and use to swing myself across so that I could, you know, do what, and at that point, you guys have described some of the background, but if it sounds cool enough, my job, I think, is to go, oh, yeah, you notice a spar sticking out from, from the mast, and it seems to be just in reach, and you can jump and grab it, and you know,
Mhm.
then
Yeah,
do
it's
your
very a
thing.
yes and game and not a.
No,
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a very
no,
cooperative
but
game. Yeah,
yeah, isn't that how
Yeah.
it is, right? Yes and not no, but.
correct. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's right.
Um, so I did try to listen to how you guys describe stuff,
Mhm.
even if it was a little different than the descriptions, in the adventure, because I was more concerned about the story that we were creating together than following the adventure 100% beat by beat, even though we covered a lot of ground and and eventually did wind up in one of the places, where we were supposed to, where you found the one-armed scissor. You
Mm-hmm.
learned about the hanging manor, and like we said at the end of the episode, if we ever got back together and played and wanted to finish it, you were gathering a force to go back to the hanging manor.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yep. And we may or may not have fought people. That may or may not have happened. It's hard to say. They may not have been there. We may have
yeah. What
had to go on
what
a investigation.
what? How did you guys feel with the combat? I don't even know that we need to talk about who we combated, although we can. Um, there was one combat out of the 3 sessions. How did you guys feel? Because that combat's one of those things that a lot of people really like when they role play, especially in a fantasy setting.
I think it was fine. It was like hyper narrative combat, and I wasn't expecting to be super tactical. Um, and it's kind of one of those games where if you have a character that's good at combat, like my character was, like it's just
Mm-hmm.
part of it is him just doing cool shit. Like
Yeah,
it's just what cool shit can your character do for the fight, which is cool. Like your character feels accomplished and
sure.
like you feel neat. And this is a game where you should feel cool the entire time you're playing the game, uh,
Mm-hmm.
with whatever you're doing because it's a narrative game where you're telling a story, not necessarily where your character is. Like you're not playing it to die or you're not playing it to be challenged. It's the challenge is making up the story, not necessarily,
Yeah,
making it difficult for your character.
yeah, I think that's definitely part of it.
Yeah, so I think the combat was fun. I think it was a fun narrative, quick combat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree. I think that the hard part about games like this versus something like D&D is that you ask yourself, okay, well, in combat, what can I do? And when you get to a game like D&D, obviously you have your standard things that are like you can do X, Y, and Z. Where
Sure.
in this, it feels like, first of all, I mean, an important part of this is that there's no initiative order, right? It's just kind of like what feels like the best
No,
thing to happen right now.
there's actions and react, or no, there's focus. The story
Mhm.
is focused, and then there's reactions.
Mm.
Yeah.
And my job was to try to kind of
Yeah,
keep
you're
those
trying to
balanced.
you're trying to balance them so it's not.
But if somebody had something cool that they wanted to do, they had every right to say, "I'd like to jump in and do this right now."
Mhm. Yeah, so the fight has a more of a beat order rather than a strict
Yes.
rigid initiative order. Where if like I do something and Brent feels like he can riff off it, that doesn't eliminate the enemy's turns because they still can react to what we do and everything
Mhm.
like that. But it feels like it's more satisfying, and that's something that I appreciate about Daggerheart. When we were playing it, is that lack of initiative order really broke my brain in the
Well,
beginning because I was like,
it's about spotlighting instead
mm-hmm,
of like if you have a character that say cooks, for example, since that's the most readily example I can think of. Like you can do a scene where like they're gathering food and cooking and like they have the spotlight earlier in the book. And then if you have combat, your combat like Corsair or
mm-hmm,
whatever, they have their spotlight. Whether or not everybody gets a turn, like they get their spotlight doing cool
mm-hmm,
stuff. And their abilities are such that like they probably will win most combats because like I had multiple abilities that just like I had an ability
They
that made him
helped.
better in close combat. I had the ability that made him like I only used the one. So
Right.
mm-hmm.
it's
You were
like,
still very effective,
yeah, you're
and
gonna
you
be
had
very
more in the
effective.
arsenal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like it's a game where it's narratively about doing cool shit as opposed
But
to.
even then, the enemies did get turns.
Mhm.
Mike got
Mm-hmm.
a turn. Mike actually
Yeah.
did some cool stuff. Maybe
Yeah.
not on the balance as cool as Brett's character.
Well, I
But
mean, like threat is important for games. Like
Yeah,
still being under threat's kind of important.
yeah.
So, like feeling like you could lose the combat or narratively could lose the combat is still important, but it's not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily as important in this style of game because it's more important
sure.
the combat being a good part of the story than being, like in D&D, like life or death is a big deal. Like you hinge a lot of combats on that. Your character could die. Um, versus this game where it's like the implication of threat is what is as important as whether or not your character could actually die.
Well, and I think it's because you, as you said, Jeff, you kind of have a choice whether your character dies or not. I think you have a choice as to how much beating you take as well. Because one thing that we didn't really get into, because it was a little, we were a little bit more advantaged than the pinwolves than we fought, is that if you're in a high stakes fight, you could start losing damage on your tracks if you have some unlucky rolls, and that could make
Yes.
some of your oh God, what were they called? Not abilities. They were called aspects. That can make
Mhm.
some of your aspects less helpful for you through the fight. And so you actually get worse as the fight goes
Yes.
on if you drag something out too long without, seeing the writing on the wall, or before you can turn the tide or something like that. That was kind of something I was curious about, because one of the things I did like about Ironsworn when we played through is that, it's also a narrative game, but you have that like, fuck, let's get them, guys. You have that like once a combat moment where you can
It
turn it
felt like
around. But I
once
don't think
combat started, you were in it until something died, your side or their side.
yeah.
Where there's a
And
lot of the combat in Wildsea where like a lot of the enemies were like they're intelligent. If they see that like half of their party is gone or disabled, they will try to flee.
Yeah.
They're,
they're not dumb.
it's like,
They-
oh, we thought this prey would be easier, and they're
Well, yeah,
not.
and I think that's different because that's more of a narrative game than, like, some
Right.
Dungeons& and Dragons games, which are like the monster will just keep attacking until
yeah. Because
one thing or another
morale
happens.
in those systems did get phased out at some point when monsters were like, they have to make a morale check. They save. Fuck this. We're out.
Well, that's because
You just killed.
that's a wargaming holdover, and so
Yeah.
when it evolved from a war game, that stuff phased out pretty quickly.
Yeah. I still think it's important because, you kill 6 of 8 goblins and the last 2 guys are just like, to the death. And you're like, what? You're goblins. Get out of
No,
here.
in crunchier games, I agree. I like the morale checks because otherwise it feels like if you try to flee, there's like one kobold still chasing you, like the Paperboy and Better Off Dead. Like, where's my $2?
I think, I feel like GM should know that they should play like humans, not like rabid
Rabbit,
animals.
yeah, rabbit. Sure.
I feel like that's not always the case though, especially when you play in new groups.
If
Like
you're getting attacked by a bunch of humans.
There were 10 of them, and now
Right.
there's one, and your party has suffered no discernible damage.
But like some
and that
people-
last
some-
one is still the
Some
Tasmanian
people
devil.
like games like that too. Like some
people do.
games are designed that way. So
yeah.
Yeah, some people do.
So out of curiosity, since we were
yeah.
talking a little bit about mechanics, one of the mechanics that I don't know that we really saw a lot of, but I remember reading about some, was the cut. Did you because that's when you took like a dice out of the pool or whatever it was, wasn't it?
I'm trying to remember because we didn't really use it. I didn't really use it. I do have the book here. Let me just see where it's at.
that's the real quality of a good game, is if there's rules you can just ignore.
Yeah, because
Well,
there's
yeah,
there's twists.
I wasn't
and
trying to ignore, but if you're playing in a larger campaign, there are
No, I'm being
twists.
serious. I prefer games where I can just ignore certain rules.
Oh, where am I looking? Sorry.
Yeah,
Oh,
but a cut is
there's montages, journeys. I'm not seeing where the cut stuff is. Oh, twist, cut, and impact.
yeah.
We didn't really have that in the 3 sessions that we came up with. But well, they say that they're here.
I do, because like the cut
Go ahead,
is
Mike.
basically like, so to the rules. The rule is that it's represented by removing a number of results equal or after a roll. So like if you have a cut 2 dice, you take your top 2 dice and you take those out of the mix, which seems incredibly punishing. Considering you don't get a
It
ton
does
of
seem
dice
very
to
punishing.
roll. But then also you as the player had the ability to cut. You can you can cut to be precise, you can cut to be impactful. and stuff like that, you know. So
Yeah.
I mean,
So
there were some ways that you could use it as a proactively to affect, like what was that? Make it more of a desperate move or something like that. But I
yes.
was curious if you had thoughts on the cut process, or if it's something you didn't like, because I mean, it was our first game. We didn't necessarily have
It
to
was our
cut
first
everything.
game, and we didn't have that many things where I thought it was going to come up. Most of the stuff you guys tried to do was more normal-ish with what it seemed like your characters would do. But I like the idea of it, because since it's a narrative game and you can say, I want to do this, right? And if it's outlandish enough, I as the Firefly would get to say, well, that's going to be very challenging. So you build your pool of dice, right? However you do it, and get your 2 or 3 or 4 dice, and you roll. And remember, doubles is a super good thing in this game. Gives you spectacular results sometimes. And so that cutting for difficulty is a good thing, I think. Where, well, you're rolling 4 dice, but I'm going to take 2, and it's going to be the top 2, which makes doubles way less likely and the chance of success way less likely.
Yeah, well, it's a modification of the
Yeah.
difficulty of an action, because there is no real difficulty. Like, you just want to, like, 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like, it's that chart system where 6 is successful. Doubles are always a success. So cutting the dice is like a mechanical way to modify uh success and complication. So I think
Yeah, and the players also can, cut for precision or for impact to try to make a move do some extra amount, but you get less to do it, so that, it's harder, but you get the success is worth more.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because it is a game that you're really only on a 6 do you get you actually do what you want consequence free. A 4 and a 5, you do what you want, but there's some complications. and then 1, 2, and 3 is
you failed.
Just fail.
And
Wasn't good.
we played a lot with that in Inevitable, that thing. And I'm not sure I felt like it worked better in this game to have the 4, 5, 6 approach than it did in Inevitable, because I don't think your dice were. What was my main concern with that? Because I felt like you didn't get enough dice to really manage that in Inevitable.
Well, one of the differences is that you can use a function. Like, there's multiple uses of your aspects. Like, you have tick box for your aspects. So it wasn't just like use it and lose it like Inevitable. Like Inevitable, it was like, I'm using my hat to impress this person.
Right.
Okay, well, you can't use a hat for anything else ever
until you rest or whatever.
Until then, I think it was the next scene, right? It was like the next time we played. Like, you only got to use everything once per session or something like that. And
there was a resting mechanic.
I remember building the dice pools in Inevitable felt like you would have 1 or 2 times a session where you might be able to get to 3 dice.
Right. Yeah.
And it felt like the game was designed like, well, you're an idiot. You should be getting to 4 dice. And I'm like, I can't get to 4 dice.
Well, it had that like
a lot of times I've only got 2.
That resource drain where, like, you literally were just really bad at everything. And if you used things, you became worse. Whereas this is, you could kind of use things a little bit more freely, and you actually had like skills you could use. Like, you had things that you were actually good at that you could roll like 3 dice on, as opposed to Inevitable was like always 2 dice or 1 dice. I think it was 1 dice, wasn't it?
I don't remember.
I think Inevitable was roll 1 dice, and then unless you have aspects that you can attach to it. And that's how you built it. So like, you started with 1, and then like you used your hat and like cowboy, whatever, and then you built your dice pool. So you never had that many dice. And you never felt that capable, because it also didn't say you did things special. Like, your aspects actually were just abilities that you can do. So it was like, an attack does more damage. Like, that was one of the abilities. It just does more damage. Like, you have an advantage in combat, and like that stuff doesn't exist in Inevitable.
Or at least we didn't see it.
It was like, you have a map that doesn't help when you're getting shot.
We struggled with Inevitable. No, we did. We 100% did.
It was a narrative game of depression. But back to Wildsea. I mean, I like the idea that it's a little bit messy and you don't always get to do that. And as the Firefly, I the idea that you can be like, okay, well, it is more difficult, but that by reducing your dice pool, that means that you get to have more opportunity for complications. So yeah, you can land that big hit, but
But
you could
sometimes the
also not land it.
complications open up the storytelling, right? It's
Complications
not like
aren't bad. Yeah.
I swung on the chandelier and then drop kicked the guy and knocked him out and we won, right?
Mhm.
So I swung on the chandelier and I slipped off of it.
And
And
you
I
still might have
landed
dropped,
and
like I drop kicked the guy, but I landed wrong. Like it's like
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Whereas inevitable, like the consequences were also like a lot more dangerous
You
than
didn't
that.
drop kick the guy. He stuck a sword,
Right. It
up
was
your
like,
bum.
oh, you miss, and it was like, oh, you hit him, but he shoots you back. Like it was
Yeah.
like, and you lose 3 of your abilities. Like you use 3 of your aspects. Like it was like arbitrarily
you,
hard.
you land on him, but now you're bleeding out.
Yeah. You
You've
broke
used
your
all your
neck.
aspects.
Yeah.
Your friends are screaming your name, hoping that you live, and he gets up and kicks you in the dirt.
Yeah. Like it was there's similar systems in that they're both based on the powered by the apocalypse style system where the 6-5-4 sort of
Right.
descending thing, and they're both similar systems in that, but the way that they handle it is completely different. Like you start in a positive place with Wildsea, and you can modify down to do epic shit. Whereas in Inevitable, you start in a weak place and you have to try and build up to a place where you can be successful. And that's a core difference that I think influences how you feel about the game. Sort of like Vaesen and the Year Zero system, where it was like you start with a certain number of dice and then you can subtract them or re-roll them or whatever. But you start positive. Whereas in Inevitable, you started at a negative, which I think made the game psychologically a little bit difficult for us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry
you're
to
supposed
rehash
to
that
feel
trauma.
heroic in Wildsea. You're supposed to feel very capable at what you can do to help
Yeah.
facilitate the storytelling.
Yeah,
I
and
think,
you're not really supposed to in Inevitable. You're supposed to feel like you're doomed.
well, but you're really well-known people that are going to the doom. You're marching.
Or well-known
You're
Doom
You're
people.
really, really doomed.
you're really famous people marching to doom.
You're in the vanguard of the Doom Parade.
You're really, really doomed. That's about black parades playing in the background while you are doomed.
So yeah, so there. Well, that was my question on cut. And it sounds like it would be interesting to see how it played and how it felt in the play and everything like that.
Yes.
Um,
I think it would integrate pretty well, but people would have to get used to it being there and doing stuff like calling your shot, right? It might be a place where we cut a dice and you get a bigger result. If you actually hit, you really hit, So I think it helps control some of the storytelling so that it doesn't start to get, out of control. And then I pull my hyper bazooka out from my backpack.
I wish I had a hyper bazooka. I should have checked. I did have a lot of stuff inside my chassis, but
You did. You were made of, as Brent fondly called it, garbage.
Garbage. She's a garbage person. That is another thing. That is another thing that I did think was interesting about the game. Like you actually had a lot of stuff you had to remember. Like
there was.
You have like 3 different aspects, and then you have like gear, and then so there was like 9 things we had to like remember to use, and there was some that I forgot. Then I thought that was interesting that from a non-crunchy game, like there's a lot about your character that you had to actually remember. Which I thought was an interesting choice as far as the game.
I was hoping one of you would bring this up, and maybe this will be we'll use this as a transition point to talk about things that were a little more challenging with the game, because just from what Brent said, I don't know if this is a game that I would throw at brand new players. I'm not saying that brand new players can't play this. But Brent, who's played a lot of role playing games, just said remembering everything on my character sheet was a challenge.
Yeah, it was hard. It was a challenge because like not only do I have to remember it, but you like the GM kind of has to remember it to
So
like
that I can
try and
sort of
work that
remind
stuff into the
you.
narrative,
Right.
which is like it's not. It's well, it didn't help that we had the long breaks in between, but it is a
No,
thing
there
that
was
it
some
is a thing.
unevenness in the game.
Yeah,
because-
it is a
which
thing,
is
and it's
fine.
not like just numbers. It's not like
Mhm.
you have to remember that you get a +5 to your attack. It's you have to remember that you have your father's sword that does special shit. You have to remember that you have a monkey companion that follows you around everywhere, which I totally forgot about, for example. Like you have to remember that you have those aspects to to play with. And if you
Right.
kind of and it's not a huge deal if you forget, but it is something that your character is intrinsically different if you forget these things.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
like I said, it was surprising how much stuff like when I was like when we were running through the last game, like I was surprised at how much stuff was on the sheet. Like I was like, oh wow, there's a lot of aspects that we have that I didn't remember. And like they do specific stuff. So you have to have some sort of reference to them. So,
Sure.
you know, so which isn't bad, but it's one of those things where I was just kind of surprised from again, it feels kind of rules light, and then it's like, oh no, it's important to know now.
Yeah. I'm not saying that it's rules heavy, but there are some things, especially in a narrative game, that I know challenge me as a player sometimes, like the whole like, well, is there something that I can swing off of since that's the example that we've been
Well,
using?
yeah, I
Or
will always say that asking new people to improv or take the spotlight, like be the person in front of the group, go. Like that's always going to be
a
difficult. I feel
challenge for
like
some people.
for new players. I feel like that's something
Sure.
you kind of have to build up to. There's people that it'll come to really easy, because they're very extroverted or something. But there are nerds, let's just be honest, that who aren't going to be comfortable with it right away, and they have to kind of work up to it a little bit.
Certainly.
Well,
No, I would agree with that.
and structure is nice because it makes it easier to understand, right? And as much as you rail on things like D&D, D&D has a lot of rules that you
Oh no,
can
I
use
think
to
D&D is
learn.
I think D&D is like a lot of people say D&D's complexity makes it not a great game to start with, but I think it's a great game to start with because it has all the things that I think are important, like cultural references, like people know it whether they know it or not. It's one dice. You really just need to know the D20, and you can like make up the rest if you really want. Like you could just do an average damage on items instead of making them roll for it if like
Sure.
stuff like that. So like, and then there's some numbers, like you have to really know like, like your base attack bonus and stuff like that. And there's a chart for it. That's not, yeah, it's crunchy. It's not super narrative, but it's not like, I mean, it's a times table basically.
Yeah, but it adds a lot of structure to it. And I think that people,
It's very
as you
clear
said,
what
some
you can
people,
do. It's very clear what you can do and what you can't do.
Right. And I think it's easy to learn as you go with D&D, if I'm being honest. Not that you can't learn as you go with Wildsea, especially if you have a few players that are seasoned.
There's maybe aren't bumpers in D, or there maybe not rails in D&D, but there's bumpers.
That's a
Whereas
good way to put it. I
in
like
narrative games like Wildsea and like Over the Edge and some other games like that, like the bumpers aren't there. So it's easy to go off the lane. It's easy to go off the lane a little bit.
Well, and it can be a little overwhelming when we played
it can
with
be.
your significant other, Jeff. It was that question came up, and the same question came up when I played with my wife. I was running a Rices game, and because Rices is very rule simple, not a lot of material to have to work through in order to teach somebody the rules. They were like, "Well, what do I do?" And you're like, "You're in a role playing game. You can literally do anything." And then you have that kind of like, now you have too many choices. So now you have too many choices, and you can be like,
and we say that, and that's not even usually true for even highly narrative games. It's like you do anything you want within the world that we have. Like
within
like,
the agreed parameters that we're generating on the fly.
It's like I'm flying. It's like this is a Victorian game where you're a doctor. That doesn't lend itself to flying per se. Like, so like there's weird things in role playing that you need to remember. Like,
Right.
we say you can do anything, but that's not 100% true, but that's closer to true.
But you might as well. I mean, even adding those qualifiers to somebody who's never done it before, they're like, so I could just go to a coffee shop?
Right.
If that's
It's
what
like,
you
yeah.
want to do.
Yeah, coffee shops exist in this world, or if they didn't, they do now. And they're like,
Yeah.
Right.
that's a new concept.
Mhm.
But there's still instances where it's like, oh, well, I want to go to the moon, and you have to be like, well, that's not really something you can do in this specific type of game. Like, there are instances where,
How do you think you would accomplish that?
yeah, you have to ask more questions instead of just no. Yeah.
Why would your person have the material or necessary connections to get to the moon?
Means
Yeah.
or desire.
Yeah.
No, that's good. Sorry,
Okay.
Mike, go ahead.
No, I was just saying,
Oh.
I think for me, like, one of the more challenging things, and to kind of build off of that, it can be a little bit of the improv exhaustion that comes with narrative games. I mean, so this is what always it's kind of interesting about when you explore all these indie systems and stuff like that, is that one of the nice things about D&D and Pathfinder and some of those are more well-established systems is that if you're new to the game, you can just pick up one or two adventures and you can run those adventures until you kind of get a handle for the rules. And then if you're really imaginative, you can leave those adventures and the adventure paths in the dust, and you can create your homebrew worlds and everything like that. Whereas like this game, there's really, I don't think there's a ton of adventures out there. Maybe there's some community ones, but definitely not to the scale of that. So you as the GM get to just improv everything. And in an alien world, when you go through your journeys, I felt like that was one of the little stressors that I noticed, is that it's like, okay, well, I'm rolling the journey. Okay, I got birds twice. Like how do we make that
one was
journey
hard 'cause
exciting?
You just happen to roll the same 2d6 in the same order, and it's essentially a chart, right? The first one is which chart do I use, and then the other one is which of the 6 choices.
I have a
Yeah.
question about that. How
Yeah.
many of those does it suggest you do in this on the track?
Forever.
As many as you think are needed, kind of thing. Like there's some there were some in the module. There were some in the book, because you could make it up simply and go, they find something, and then if you really want to be inventive on the spot, find something esoteric that gives them options to do something, whether it's salvage, like you guys did a couple of times, investigate, stay away from.
Yeah,
I'm not going to go see a disembodied head in a tree.
Sort of feel like that sort of meandering thing that's a bit difficult for me. Roll on a chart and see what happens, and then like the line goes like this, because there is a story that we're doing, and I understand it's a collaborative story, but like putting stuff in that isn't related to the story, to me, is weird sometimes.
It felt to me like you were on a long car trip, right? And
it feels to me
and
kind
you
of like
drove past a cactus with 3 crows on it, and you just happened to notice it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
it feels to
but
me,
the road trip's still going on, and the cactus has nothing to do with the road trip being completed.
It feels to me like I feel like a pre-canned adventure like the one on Scissor that has stuff like that in it is like reading a book, and then the author puts in a paragraph that's about paint drying.
Their lunch?
Or their lunch, or like their pet dog, and you're like, what just happened?
No,
I think a few are okay. I think a few are okay, but I think you got to be careful with like, just keep rolling dice, man. Just keep rolling until like, you hit a number.
You're trying to complete the track, right? And it takes, and you could have had an almost immediate success, but it took, a specific watch type, and then it took a specific roll on that chart.
Okay, so are there milestones, or is it like you roll until you hit a specific number?
Depending on how much information you got affected the length of the track. Like your guys' track, I made it 4, and then after that, you were going to start getting some real hints to stuff.
Okay, because I could see,
but it could have been 6 or 7 if you would have just been like, we don't need a chart, and we're gonna, we know
blindly float off into space. Because
Yeah.
I could see like having like a target number where it's like there's a list and you get +1 for having a chart, you get +1 for having this, and you're trying to get to 6.
Yeah, so it's short, so the track was shorter, and then after a certain point, if you hadn't automatically hit it, then more things became successes for you.
Right.
And instead of it being, "Oh, we saw birds and trees again. How unique." Or no, birds
I
birds came and landed on the ship. That's what it was. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's just the random encounter thing is always weird to me. Like where it's like
And some of them
we
could have
want
been
to add
hostile. I think there was a
w-
marauders.
we want to just add
Ouch.
filler to we want to make your game longer, so we're just gonna add
Well,
things in there.
Well, it is a storytelling game, but no, I
Yeah.
kind of felt the same way as you did, and I was like, "Shit! If I wanted to make this longer, I got to make my own chart."
Yeah, you could and you coulda. Yeah.
well,
I
and
don't know if I
I
want to make my own charts.
Well, there's two things that I'd say here. First of
Okay.
all, is that the the part that first with any group you learn your group, and if your group is really interested in these things, like the first time we encountered the birds, like I was like, oh, I'll do this and I'll talk about it and I'll have a role playing moment to talk about my char
And you
interacting with
did.
this
I
species,
actually
and that was.
appreciated that.
And then the second time I just go ditto, like I didn't feel anything new to add to that type of role
And
playing, so
maybe
it
I
didn't
should have
really need.
changed it when you guys
Yeah.
rolled
No,
it a
I think
second
you did.
time.
I think you did fine. But what
Yeah.
I'm saying is, like, I think if you were like, you guys are on a boat in the Wildsea, just going, like you're just
Mhm.
scavenging,
You just
like, and having a chart where you do stuff like that and like things happen,
well, that
I
could be
think is
interesting.
fine. But I think
Sure.
having a goal, like having an endpoint where like we're trying to find this ship and just having
And
shit continuously happen feels like people are going to be dead before we get there. Like it feels like there's some
okay,
like
I think that's valid.
I think that's more my point. Is like it's
No,
like
that's that. Okay,
we have an
sure.
objective, and now all this stuff is just in the
And
way
now
of
we're
getting the
looky
objective.
looing.
Yeah, and now
Well,
it's like saying your kid is lost in L.A. and you
right.
stop to look at
And
that
then I'm like,
cactus with
hey,
the birds.
I'm gonna pick you up, and we're gonna go look for him. But I got to stop at the mall first.
Right, like it's like important things have happened, and we're
Okay,
trying to make those important
that is a
things not
fair
happen.
criticism. That is a fair criticism,
I don't
and
think it's the criticism so much. It's kind of an interesting thing that happens in pre-canned adventures where it's like they put things in that aren't related to like what's actually happening, and sometimes
just in
it
case
feels
the
dissonant
players
to
go
me.
off the rails, and in this
Yeah,
case, the system sort of. Yeah, I'm picking up that it sounded like you guys were meandering a little bit,
yeah. But I don't think
and
that was you. I think
well,
that's kind of how it's
well,
written and how the system is.
it was at least my interpretation of how the adventure was written.
Well,
Well, but I think
if you have a track and random things happen, that's the way the
Yeah,
game is.
well,
that's
but
true.
here's the outcome, right? Like, so let's say, because the journey phase of this is really important because it's your chance to experience the world and have your role playing opportunities with your peers. Like to say, okay, well, you don't find the one armed scissor right now, but as you're traveling through this, you do
I
spy something that's potential salvage, and you can't
I like
necessarily turn
that.
away free lunch, and so you have to as a group decide, okay, well, the priority is, as to Brent's point, we have a lost bunch of sailors on the sea. Do we go and grab the scrolls that could obviously be valuable, or do we prioritize those human lives and then hope that we find these scrolls on the
I,
way back or not? But I think the role playing component to it is really important for people to even have that discussion as to how you prioritize your objectives and
okay,
what's important, because you may not. I mean, the one arm scissors is kind of a cut and dry.
Right.
There are
It's a
people.
pre-canned adventure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is like I guess my suggestion to people who DM this in the future, if they do it, is
Mm.
just like you want to be careful with how much you use it. Like if you just keep having them rolls and birds keep showing up on their boat, or like things keep happening on the boat
well,
that aren't what you're saying, where like you're collecting salvage or whatever. They're
right.
just things happen. Like you
Mhm.
want to be careful on just how many things happen just for pacing purposes, because I feel like it's real
That's
easy to
fair.
feel like, okay, now we're just letting these people die.
I I I think one of the things in hindsight, right, and after hearing this, I think like at the end of each day, after the
Mhm.
wacky stuff happened, I think we could have had a meeting with the captain and had him going, well, based on our chart, it looks like we are really getting close to where we believe that, like and I don't know if you speak in numbers. Like after the first day, we're at 20. I think we're about a quarter of the way there.
Yeah, or something. Yeah,
or
we're
something
on
like.
track or something.
Well,
It just kind of make time feel important.
No. I think
Yeah.
I think I could have done a better job communicating that. And
Well,
no, this isn't a. This
I
is
don't
just
necessarily
a.
think it was you.
This is
I
we're
think
just
it's
talking, right?
sort
This
of
is just
how-
a. Because
No,
I felt that
it's a good
the
idea.
thing you felt, I felt too, and I was like, shit.
What do I do? Yeah.
What do I do?
Well, and I think that you've hit the nail on the head is that, you kind of have this urgent priority. Because like here's a different context, right? So
Sure.
if the game was, we found this chart that reveals this location that may exist after 100 years of something called the Hanging Manor. There are these books there. Why don't you, I'll sell you the chart, and why don't you go check it out, and we'll buy the books back at a premium, and then you're off to go find.
Feel
these
free to meander and take
and
3
then,
weeks
and
to
so
get
as
there.
you go, you're a ship that's out looking for books. That's like, okay, well, let's go find let's go. Oh, we see some odd, cool shit in the trees. I'm here for odd, cool shit in the trees. Let's go, man. And then, I think that meander changes, but to Brent's point, it's like there's a priority here that kind of becomes a fight, and it's hard to, and like I said, if you have the right group, you could have interesting role playing opportunities when you have that. Like,
you
can't just leave that shit on the treetops. You got to get that shit before somebody else does.
But Brent's character was very much about saving human life. Like he was. Like he communicated that to me several times. Like I think he did a good job doing that, saying this is one of the character's motivations. And I wasn't doing anything to slow it down, but I also wasn't doing a good enough job communicating.
That's not necessarily a character observation.
That yes, you are making good progress, right? And I didn't just want to go, oh, you crossed off another bubble on the track.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm saying. More. That's actually exactly what I'm saying. Is like, I was wondering if the track was like, there's a straight line. It's like you do it, like day happens, you have a bubble, roll in the chart. Okay, next day happens, roll in the chart. Next day happens, roll in the chart.
That's essentially how it happens.
That could you might not enjoy that.
They had no
clarifying.
They had a lot
question.
of tracks. Like even like when you did one, I'll loop back to you in 1 second, Mike.
Sure.
Like even some of the enemies, like when you did combat with them, some of them had 8 bubbles. A few of them, a different version of the same creature had like 14 if they were particularly hungry or upset, or you happen to have some charts on a table. So the tracks were varying lengths, but you guys did a good job and had some. And I'm just taking some notes that I could have communicated it a little bit better or in a different way.
If you modify the length of the tracks, it's fine. But what I'm saying is like you just random encounters, I think, get old after a while, I guess is what I'm saying. They seem
it's one of those things that I don't miss about old D&D.
Especially if you have
every 10 minutes,
planned.
wandering monsters, every 10 minutes. You guys have been looking for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Dungeon turn.
Go
Here's
ahead
a Minotaur.
You were going to say, Mike, and then I have an example.
I just for my own clarification, like, because you said we had 4 bubbles to fill in. That meant on our 4th bubble, we found it no matter what. Like, that's what that meant?
Once you got to the 5th bubble, then... on the 5th bubble, you started getting more much higher chance to
clues.
Get it.
So I feel like, to me, just from a narrative perspective, I feel like if you want to do random encounters and you want to add some variety to it, to say, hey, we don't know if we'll find it right away, you say, okay, what's the minimum and maximum that we'll do? Okay, I want to at least have one or 2 random encounters. So let's say that they can't, even with the best of rolls, I want to have at least one montage scene where they get to find their characters a little bit through the journey through the Wildsea. But I don't want to have more than 4 of these happen, because then they'll feel like they're not making any progress, towards whatever it is. And I feel like that's good advice. I think that's a, I've kind of done that in other games where it's like there are some people, there are some games where it's just like, well, unless the overland travel is going to be interesting, they just get there.
Right.
And then I kind of agree with that.
Sure.
Yeah. Like maybe one event in the middle, something happens, but you don't just say, you go out, you set up camp, and you have a peaceful night. Like you don't just say that like 18 times. Like that would
you
get
pack
really
up in the
old.
morning.
Yeah.
You start your journey.
And even like in Dolmenwood, which had camping mechanics where it's like you had several aspects to camping, I don't think I would force you to do that every time, to be like, okay, well, you've set up camp and you've chosen to build camaraderie. How do you do so today?
Yeah,
This
I
is the
think
sixth
only
time
if
we've done that.
yeah, only if
Right.
the party really wants to.
You
Because
do it as
there
a
were potential bonuses for the party. There are also
Yeah.
potential detriments for the
Yeah,
party,
I can
which we
see some
discovered.
I can see some good things to the track. Like I said, I think I
Okay.
think if I was doing something similar to a track, like I said, I would be like I said, it would be like a number of like checkpoints, and then it would be like, oh, they got the map that cuts off a
Sure.
check, and I would do something like that as opposed to I'm just warning people that like your adventurers could get fatigue of
Could
No,
you
this
imagine?
this is
like
good
if you
advice.
rolled
This is
really
good
poorly,
advice.
how many
They're-
times would you roll the like you montage? Oh, you rolled a 1 again. Are
so
their
it's got-
12th
it's-
bubble?
It's got
Don't
those
get caught
got
up in
those
the fact
goddamn birds again.
that they're on a ship and they got to have watches because bad shit can happen. Like it's interesting. It's interesting to think about
It
this.
is interesting. And like I said, if you were doing more of an open, like if you had written the game and you were like, you guys are on a ship and you're going and doing things, which I kind of feel like is how the game is actually like
Mhm.
designed, is you're
Honestly,
supposed to kind
I
of just
agree.
have these characters and they're doing things and they're not necessarily, it's not necessarily for they're going and doing a thing. They're just going and doing the thing. They're not per se like they're doing for salvage or anything. That's just, they go out and that's what they do. Like there was an objective that we had in this case because it was a pre-canned
Right.
adventure, which I think is different.
Mm.
This is the
Well-
case where pre-canned adventures I think are hard for kind of how
Sometimes no, especially if you haven't
what it
especially if you
wants you
haven't
to
run
do.
the system.
Yeah.
I am in no way saying that I did everything
No, I think you
100%
did a
the
good
way it
job.
should have been, or
We enjoyed ourselves, so
I thought we
I
had
mean,
fun.
in a narrative game like this is hard to just pick up cold if you don't
Sure.
know a lot, in my opinion. So I think you did a really good job.
I remember in my research finding someone who had run an open world Wildsea campaign, and they're like, the weird thing about Wildsea is I have all of these things and all these story hooks out there, and everybody in the crew decided to have an animal companion, and the game has become more about them finding the specific food that their animal companion likes the most and training them to do tricks and handy things around the ship. And he's like,
Well-
and you know what? If that's the game they want to play,
Yeah.
that's the game they're going to get.
Welcome to Wildsea Pocket Monster Edition.
Exactly. But I'm like, it's cool that the game has
Yeah.
that sort of flexibility to me. But it's also a game that I think I realize isn't necessarily for everyone, even if I do really like it.
Yeah, it's a game that could easily, like, I do feel it's more built for campaign play than one shot play. Like I feel like you want to play these characters for a while and do a lot in the wild to see if you're playing these characters, not like pre-canned one shots. Like I said, this one of his sisters being like, "Go save these people," and then being like, "The birds take up."
Was
a
it save the
day."
people or save the books?
Well, for my character was save the people, but
Okay.
but like I said, losing a day for birds twice seemed like,
well, but I think
for
I don't think we
me-
lost a day. I think it was just something that
That's how it
happened as
felt,
we
though.
traveled.
But
What
that's
I'm
how it
picking up is
felt,
that's how it
though.
felt.
And that's how the game is designed, is to have an event a day.
Sure.
And then, because you don't pay attention to the boring shit. Like, why would you do that? You mop the boat. That's what your character does the entire day.
Tell
me
us
how.
your
Tell me how
shift
you
on
mop
watch.
the boat.
I
You
saw
know,
a lot
how-
of
I've been
greenery.
really creative lately.
I threw
Tell
a
me how
couple of
you-
lines over the edge, and I caught. I snagged a spline apple and a rusty piece of chain. It was a good
Tell me
day.
how you emptied out the bilge on your. Tell me how you cleaned out the bilge on your fancy chainsaw ship. Like, that's not. I don't think that's. I mean, certain people may want to play that sort of game, I guess, but like, I don't feel like that's the intent, really.
Yeah, no, that brings up a good point. One of the thoughts I had after we got done, when I was kind of debriefing myself, was that
Mhm.
this game needs a really good session 0 for expectation. You really need to set expectations. Like do the normal session 0 stuff, but what kind of explorers do you want to be? Do you want to be going on quests? Do you want to just be salvaging stuff as you find it? Do you know what I mean? Like, You
Yeah.
want to meander and float from budding plant to budding plant, and you know what I mean?
Treetop to treetop.
Exactly.
Well,
I,
and you know what? And it's fun though, because it does give you enough hooks that you could say like, okay,
it
well, we're a
does.
ship of Leviathan hunters, but you don't
I
always
think it
see
has.
Leviathans.
I
You
think it
know.
has a lot of potential for being a sandbox game.
Hmm. Yeah.
I think it does. I think it does. I wouldn't feel comfortable making a sandbox game
Mhm.
right now, but I I think you're right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like that idea.
Well, and speaking of which, because we're about to, I think we're about ready to
Yeah.
close this episode. Next, we're going to be looking at Forbidden Lands, which is another sandboxy game, and we're going to kind of play it a little sandboxy. I think I'm still reading the books, but we'll be doing character creation next time, and we'll hope to be exploring that aspect of gameplay a little bit in this. So we have our two rogues here, and we'll see how they do in a different world that's also dangerous, but dangerous differently
Exactly.
and in a different rule system.
Well, that's kind of what we do
There's
around
less
here.
plants. There's less plants in Forbidden Realm, Forbidden Lands.
That's not
No
true.
ginormous trees.
There could be ginormous trees. I don't know.
God.
If we run into a tall shank, I'm not climbing it.
If we're have a ship that's on the top of trees, you're at that point you're ripping off Wildsea.
Fair enough. So of course, if if you played Forbidden Lands and you've made it to this part of the episode and you want to give us tips, pointers, and all those kind of things, let us know in the comments. If you would like to see us play a game, let us know your suggestions down below. We might revisit Dolmenwood, just because it sounds like people might want to see that actually played on screen, just to see how we ran through it. So we might do that in our next couple of games as well. Just let us know. We like playing games, and even there's really sky's the limit. We're even willing to pick up some games depending on the rarity. I think, what was that really rare game that I just picked up, Supernatural? We
That's
might
true. You
play that
did.
on stream. I don't even know what system it uses. Honestly, I think,
It's
does it
it's
Cortex or
the same.
something?
Yeah, it's the Cortex system with like all of those like property games used like
Right.
for a while, like Firefly
Mm.
and games like that. So it's related. It's got a core system.
I
Nice.
played Firefly, and yeah, it's been years. Maybe I don't remember it as well as I'd
Now,
like.
maybe you do.
Maybe you do. But one thing I will say about rule sets that's weird is once you have more experience with them, some of them are better than you remember with other systems. Like systems make
Oh,
more
that's
sense
true.
after you have
Sure.
experience with other systems. So
Sure, maybe that's possible. I also have the Firefly game, Serenity, I think it is. So if you want to play
I
that,
have
we
it
can.
too somewhere.
Yeah. So we have games that we could play. It's just even off our shelf. So maybe what we do is we post our shelves. Obviously Brent has far more games on his shelf than I do. But we can you can suggest we take stuff off our shelf rather than buying new games too. So get through our piles back here. But that's it. Jeff, how do they talk to us outside of the comments on YouTube?
You can find us on most social media platforms. We are at Rollwise. You can also email us, rollwiseguys@gmail.com.
And as always, thank you for hanging out with us for as long as you have. And as always, roll well and roll wise and be safe out there, everybody. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.